That word, business, hit differently. It felt powerful, like proof. By my 29th birthday, I'd filed an LLC, got my first retainer client, rented a co-working space. I took a photo with the keys to the office and texted it to no one, just kept it for myself. Meanwhile, my sister was still at home. Same room, same excuses, same silence when I shared good news. The only thing that changed was the size of her complaints. Mom would call me every now and then, voice tight. My mother said, "She's just going through something. You know how sensitive she is." I used to respond with, "Yeah, I know." Now I just said, "Okay," and let the silence do the rest. My friends started to notice too. At one dinner, my friend Clara said, "You ever notice your family only checks in when they need something?" I sipped my drink. "It's a pattern." She said, "You don't owe them more just because they expect it." That stuck with me. Expectations are not contracts. When I walked past the mirror in my office space, I barely recognized myself. Not because I'd changed physically, but because I looked, finally, like someone who belonged to herself. The debt thing started to make more sense after that. I heard from another cousin that my parents had maxed out one of their credit cards on a vacation they took to de-stress. A vacation my sister was also on, all while I was budgeting for a used desk chair. I laughed again. I had to. The absurdity was comedy by now. They used to call her the Golden Girl. But now the gold was rusting. I hadn't spoken to my parents in months. No texts, no calls, nothing. And honestly, it was peaceful. Then, one Thursday afternoon, I got a voicemail from my dad. Just his voice, low and oddly polite. Dad said, "Hey kiddo, wondering if we could maybe talk sometime soon. No pressure, just some things we wanted to run by you." It was the first time he'd sounded unsure of himself. A few hours later, I got a message from my mom. Mom said, "We know you're busy, but we could really use your advice. Things are a little tight over here." Advice. That was always code for money. I didn't respond right away. I sat with it, read the message again, watched the voicemail twice. Then, out of curiosity, I checked my business email. We had a new rental application from a couple named Gerald and Lynn. I blinked. That was my parents. I looked at the address. Sure enough, they were trying to rent a 2-bedroom in the building I had purchased 6 months prior. I owned the place. They didn't know that. When I bought it, I kept it under my LLC. My name wasn't front and center. I had hired a management company, played it smart. And now? They were applying to live in one of my units. I called the building manager. I said, "Hi, this is the owner. Can you schedule a showing for Unit 204? I'll be there." She said, "Of course. The applicants requested a late Friday appointment. Does that work for you?" I smiled. "Perfect." I called my parents back. I said, "Let's do dinner tomorrow." My treat. My dad hesitated. "You sure?" I said, "Absolutely. I have some time." We met at a nice restaurant downtown, one I used to walk past and dream about affording. I wore my work blazer and my confidence like armor. When they arrived, I stood to hug them. My mother looked thinner. My dad looked tired. We ordered, we ate, we made small talk. Then my mom cleared her throat. Mom said, "So, we might need to downsize. The house is, well, it's not really ours anymore." I nodded. "I heard." My dad looked up. "You did?" I said, "Word gets around." They glanced at each other. Then my mother said, "We applied for a place. Small condo, good price, just hoping it works out." I took a sip of my wine. I said, "Unit 204? They froze. My dad asked, "How did you—" I smiled. "I own the building." My mom stared at me. "What?" I leaned in. I bought it 6 months ago, through my company. I review every application, including yours. The silence was so sharp I could hear the clink of a fork 2 tables away. Then my dad let out a low breath. We didn't know. I said, I know you didn't. That's why I invited you here. My mom whispered, we weren't trying to take advantage. We just... I held up a hand. I said, you don't owe me an explanation. But I think you should know something. I reached into my bag and pulled out the folder. Inside were copies of bank transfers, emails, receipts. All the times I'd helped, all the times I paid, all the times they turned to me quietly. I slid it across the table. I said, this is what I've contributed to this family, financially. My mom looked like she might cry. I continued, you made me feel like a tenant in your home, but now here you are, trying to become tenants in mine. No one spoke for a full minute. Then I smiled gently. I said, the good news is, I accept your application. You can have the unit, first month free. My dad looked stunned. You mean it? I said, yes. But going forward, everything is in writing. No more expectations, no more quiet debts. If you live in my building, you follow my rules. My mom said softly, we understand. I nodded. Good. We finished the meal. I paid the bill. As we stood to leave, my dad looked at me differently. Not like a daughter. Like a woman who had built something. Funny how quickly respect shows up when they think you have leverage. It didn't take long. 2 weeks after they moved into the condo, I got a message from my mother. Then another from my father. Then a third, longer this time, explaining how it was just a temporary situation, a rough patch, and how they knew they could count on me. The message ended with, we were hoping you might be able to loan us just a little something to get us through this month. We'll make it up to you. I stared at the screen for a long time. It wasn't even surprising. That was the part that hurt. I used to think that maybe, if I did enough, gave enough, proved myself enough, they would see me as more than the fallback. But they didn't want a daughter. They wanted a bank. I didn't respond right away. Instead, I opened a new document on my laptop and began typing. Loan agreement draft. Terms and conditions. Amount, $3,000. Interest, 5% repayment, term, 12 months, and so on. I formatted it, converted it to PDF, attached it to an email, and added a short message. Subject, response to loan request. Body. Hi, Mom and Dad. Attached is the agreement for the loan you requested. If the terms are acceptable, please sign and return. First payment will be due on the 1st. Best, your landlord. I stared at it for a moment, then hit send. A few hours later, my phone rang. It was my dad. I picked up and said, Hi. He cleared his throat. We got your email. I said, Good. There was silence for a beat. Then he said, You can't be serious. I am, I replied calmly. That's how business works. He scoffed. We're not some strangers. We're your parents. I remember, I said. I'm also the daughter you asked to pay rent when I had nothing. That was different, he snapped. I stayed quiet. He softened his tone. Come on, sweetheart. This is a family emergency. And I'm offering a solution, I said. A legal, fair one. He huffed. You think money makes you better than us now? No, I said. I think the way you treat people when they have money shows what you really value. There was a long pause. He said, We're not signing a contract. I said, Then I'm not giving a loan. He hung up. A few minutes later, my mother called. Her voice was quiet, almost tearful. Sweetheart, she said, we didn't mean to make you feel like you owe us. We just thought Maybe you'd want to help. You know, after everything we've done for you." I let the words settle. The old guilt tried to creep in, but I didn't let it. I said, "I do remember what you did for me. I also remember being told to pay rent while my sister lived for free." "That's not fair," she said quickly. She was going through things. "And I wasn't?" I asked. She didn't answer. I continued, "I'm not punishing you. I'm protecting myself. If you want help, I'll offer it the same way any business would. Transparent, written, bound by agreement." "We're your parents," she whispered. "And you've made it very clear what role I play in this family," I said. "Support system, wallet, backup plan." She sniffled. "I didn't think you'd be so cold." "I'm not cold," I said. "I'm just finally done pretending I'm not being used." I ended the call. No yelling, no tears, just a clean line drawn. Later that night, I got a text from my sister. She wrote, "Really? Contracts now? Wow. You've changed." I didn't respond. I just saved a screenshot. The next day, I got another message from a friend of the family. Aunt Lillian wrote, "Your parents are struggling. Can't you be the bigger person?" I didn't answer, but if I had, I would have said, "I have been the bigger person my whole life. I was the one who cleaned up, paid bills, made peace, filled in. Being the bigger person doesn't mean being a bottomless well. Eventually, the well runs dry." A few days later, I got a formal reply to the loan email. Unsigned, declined. I expected that, but I also expected what came next. Silence. No more calls, no more texts, no follow-ups. They didn't want help. They wanted a free pass. The moment terms entered the picture, the game ended. They weren't looking for support. They were looking for submission. I walked through the building a few days later and saw the blinds drawn on their unit. No music, no laughter, just shadows behind glass. Funny how things change. They asked for help. I sent the invoice. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel guilty. I felt free. Because I finally knew the truth. They didn't lose access to my money. They lost access to the part of me they never respected. They called me cold. That was the phrase they landed on after everything. Not selfish, not rude, just cold. It started with a cousin's message. "Your mom says she barely recognizes you anymore." Then came the second wave, from the family friends, the aunts, the passive-aggressive voices that always seem to appear just in time to shame. "You used to be so dependable." "She just misses you." "Your sister said you won't even answer her texts." And my favorite, "It's not like they abused you." As if mistreatment only counts when it leaves a bruise. I didn't respond. Not because I didn't have words, but because I finally understood that I didn't need to. I had spent my entire life performing for their version of family. I was responsible. I was steady. I picked up the slack, filled the gaps, and carried the weight of everyone else's comfort while mine was considered optional. When things broke, I fixed them. When money was tight, I opened my wallet. When feelings were hurt, I apologized first. And what did I get? Temporary praise. Hollow thanks. And the same cycle on repeat. They didn't love me for who I was. They valued what I could do. "You're so strong," my mom would say, right after handing me the bill. "She's just going through a phase," they'd say about my sister, right after she called me names and borrowed from my closet without asking. It was never equal. It was never even close. And when I finally stopped playing my part, that's when I became cold. Not to everyone, though. My friends, the family I chose, call me warm, safe, loyal. My team at work calls me inspiring. My partner calls me his peace. I've built a life that feels like mine for the first time ever. I have mornings that start with silence, not stress. I have evenings filled with people who say thank you and mean it. I have boundaries now, and I protect them like I protect my peace. My parents still think I'm going through a phase. My sister still sends texts with the same tone. Wow, still ignoring me? I don't respond. Because I've learned that silence can be a boundary too. I don't owe explanations to people who never listened the first time, and I don't trade my mental health for temporary harmony anymore. One of my coworkers once asked, "Don't you miss them?" I thought about it for a moment, then I said, I miss the idea of them, the version of family I wanted, the love I thought I could earn, the fairness I spent years chasing, but I don't miss being invisible.
I don't miss being the backup plan. I don't miss the conditional acceptance that evaporated the moment I said no. People like to paint women like me as bitter, as harsh, as unforgiving. But here's the truth. I'm not cold. I'm just no longer available for disrespect dressed up as tradition. I'm not ungrateful. I'm just no longer willing to pay for a seat at a table where I was always served last. I'm not heartless. I just stopped being useful to people who never saw me. It's strange in a way. You grow up believing that being the strong one will earn you love. That if you stay quiet, stay helpful, stay responsible, someone will finally see you as worthy. But it doesn't work that way. What it does is make people comfortable with your sacrifice. They stop asking if you're okay because they assume you always are. They stop offering help because they think you don't need it. They stop treating you like a person and start treating you like a utility. There was a time when I would cry after every phone call. I'd hang up and ask myself, why do I feel so small after talking to them? It took me years to learn that love without respect is just manipulation in softer clothes. Now, I have routines that belong only to me. Morning coffee on the balcony. Late night walks with no destination. Laughter over dinner with people who don't keep score. I've replaced guilt with clarity. I've replaced obligation with choice. My therapist once asked me, what would happen if you never fixed anything for them again? At first I panicked. The thought felt like betrayal. But over time I understood. The only betrayal was abandoning myself to earn crumbs. So no, I'm not cold. I'm careful. I'm not distant. I'm discerning. I've learned how to say no without apology. How to say yes only when I mean it. How to say nothing at all when silence protects my peace better than explanation ever could. My sister still thinks I'm holding a grudge.
But I'm not. Grudges require energy, emotion, investment. I've simply let go. Let go of trying to fix what was never mine to repair. Let go of chasing the approval of people who only saw my worth in dollars or deeds. Let go of pretending I was ever truly part of the circle. Now I'm building new circles. Circles made of trust, reciprocity, and joy. Circles where I don't have to shrink to fit in. And no, I don't hate my family. I don't wish them harm. I just finally realized that love doesn't mean unlimited access. That being related doesn't mean I owe them my peace. So when they call me cold, I just smile. Because for the first time in my life, I know exactly where I stand. And it's not on eggshells. It's not in the background. It's not behind the curtain, pulling strings to make everyone else feel okay. It's in the sunlight, firm, clear, unapologetic. They called me cold. I call it boundaries. The argument started over breakfast, if you could call it that. I had just finished washing the dishes. My cereal bowl was still dripping in the rack when my dad cleared his throat and said, "We need to talk about the rent." I turned from the sink. "Rent?" He didn't look at me when he answered. "You're 25 now, working full-time. You live here. It's time you start contributing." Across the kitchen table, my sister slouched in her hoodie, chewing loudly on a piece of toast she hadn't made. Her phone buzzed. She giggled at something on it, completely unbothered. I looked at her, then at both of them. So, does that mean we're all paying rent now? My mom didn't even blink. She's not in the same position as you, she said, motioning toward my sister. You've got a good job. She's still trying to find herself. She's been trying for 6 years, I said quietly. My sister rolled her eyes. Wow, jealous much? I turned to her. Jealous of what? Living here for free? Sleeping until noon? And treating this house like a hotel? My mom's voice got sharper. Don't talk to your sister like that. She's just going through a rough time, my dad added, still avoiding eye contact. I stood there, barely holding on to my coffee mug, heat rising in my chest. So let me get this straight, I said. I wake up every day at 6 a.m., commute, pay my own phone bill, groceries, everything. And now you want rent from me, but she what? Gets a free pass because she's the sensitive one? My mom exhaled, annoyed. It's not about free passes. It's about fairness. I laughed, just once. Fairness? You think this is fair? My dad finally looked up. We're trying to be consistent. You're being selective, I shot back. My sister stood up and grabbed the last pancake from the plate. God, you're so dramatic. You've always been like this, so uptight. I looked at her. Really looked at her. Same smug grin, same hollow charm, the golden child, the one who always made messes and never cleaned them up. My voice was calm when I replied, I'm not dramatic, I'm tired. She snorted. Whatever. No one's making you stay. That's when it hit me. They weren't making me stay. They were making it clear I was only welcome if I paid for the privilege. I placed my coffee mug down on the counter with a soft click. Got it. My mom gave me that tight-lipped smile I knew too well. We're not trying to push you out. We just think it's time you carried your weight. I looked at her, trying to decide if she actually believed what she was saying. I wanted to scream, or cry, or ask them how long they'd been planning this conversation. I wanted to know if they'd rehearsed it together in whispers after I went to bed, if they truly didn't see the imbalance, or if they just didn't care. Instead, I stayed quiet. I nodded once. Okay, my dad frowned. Okay? I wiped my hands on a towel. You want rent? I understand. My mom tilted her head. You're not upset? I smiled politely. I just needed to know where I stand. And I did. I stood outside the inner circle, outside the unconditional support they gave my sister. I was the responsible one, the built-in backup plan, the reliable daughter who always figured it out so they never had to worry about me. Apparently, I was never allowed to struggle, only serve. Later that night, I heard my sister laughing from her room, loud, carefree, obnoxious, the same way she laughed when she wrecked my car in college and my parents brushed it off with, "It was just an accident." The same laugh she used when she borrowed my clothes without asking and stained them, and Mom said, "It's just fabric." Meanwhile, I was the one who got silent treatment for leaving dishes in the sink or coming home late from work. I stared at the ceiling and wondered how many versions of this conversation they'd had before I even entered the room. I wondered how long they'd seen me as the tenant and her as the daughter. My friends used to joke that I was the third parent. They didn't know how true that felt. I paid bills, I helped with groceries, I fixed the Wi-Fi when it went out. I was the one who organized birthday dinners and bought thoughtful gifts. And somehow, all of that added up to a simple message: you're doing fine. So now, pay up. But her? She was coddled, cradled, excused. Every bad grade, every failed job, every breakup. There was always a reason, always someone else to blame. I didn't have that luxury. I never did. I had responsibility. I had expectations. I had bills. And now I had a decision to make. Because something in me cracked that morning. Not loudly, not all at once. Just a quiet split down the middle. The kind of crack you don't notice until the whole structure shifts. I lay in bed that night, eyes open, staring at the glow of my phone screen. And I knew. I wasn't going to fight them on this. I wasn't going to debate or protest or beg. I was going to make a choice. Not to prove anything, not to punish anyone. Just to finally choose myself. I was the quiet one. That's what they used to call me. Always so quiet, my aunt would say at family dinners, ruffling my hair like I was a well-behaved dog. So polite, so easy. My mom would beam. She's our little helper. And I was. I helped. I learned early that if I didn't make noise, I'd be left alone. And if I worked hard, I'd get a smile, maybe even a thank you, if the stars aligned. Meanwhile, my sister, she was the storm. She could throw tantrums in the grocery store aisle, and Mom would coo, "She's just sensitive." She once flung a plate of dinner onto the floor because she didn't like green beans. My dad calmly picked her up and said, "Let's get you something else, sweetie." I remember watching, stunned, from the corner of the table, fork still in my hand, green beans untouched. I ate them all anyway. That was how it always was. If she made a mess, someone else cleaned it. If I made a mess, I was irresponsible. When she got a C in math, my parents paid for a tutor and told everyone, "She's just not a numbers person." When I got a B+, my dad asked, "What happened to the A?" I remember being 12 and saving up my allowance for a month to buy Mom a birthday present. A lavender candle, her favorite scent. I even wrapped it in tissue paper and left it on her nightstand with a note that said, "Love you." She smiled when she saw it and said, "Oh, how sweet." Then set it aside like it was a leftover receipt. That same year, my sister gave her a macaroni necklace. Mom wore it for days. In middle school, I started picking up babysitting gigs. I saved every dollar. I had a little red notebook where I tracked it. $10 from the neighbors, $15 from watching the twins across the street. By freshman year, I was buying my own school clothes. One afternoon, I got home with 2 new pairs of jeans from a thrift shop. I was proud. My sister looked at them and scoffed. "That's what you're wearing?" I didn't answer. She turned to my mom and said, "Can we go to the mall this weekend?" Mom nodded without hesitation. "Of course, you need something nice for picture day." I stood there, holding my jeans. No one looked my way. That's how it always went. I worked. She received. I planned. She reacted. I adapted. She demanded. But no matter what, she was the golden one. When she was born, the house filled with balloons and visitors. Everyone called her the little miracle. She had colic, then asthma, then a food allergy, and somehow all of it became part of her charm. Me? I didn't have health issues. I didn't cry much. I didn't ask for anything. And because of that, I became invisible. At school, I got straight A's, perfect attendance, a quiet reputation. At home, I became the one who folded laundry without being asked, who reminded everyone of dentist appointments, who knew how to reset the Wi-Fi when it crashed. Dad once told me, "You're the glue that holds this house together." I remember nodding, not sure if it was a compliment or a sentence. Years later, I realized it was both, because glue doesn't get noticed. Glue is expected. They always said they were proud of me. "We don't have to worry about you," my mom would say, handing my sister $20 just in case she needed lunch money. It never occurred to them to ask if I needed lunch money. When I was 17, I got my first real job at a bookstore downtown. I worked weekends and evenings, juggled homework, and still came home to find dishes piled in the sink, Because you're better at cleaning the kitchen. One night, I came home exhausted, only to hear my dad say, "Hey, your sister needs help with her college application. Can you look it over?" She had been lying on the couch watching TV for 3 hours. I sat down next to her, red pen in hand, and read through her sloppy essay about finding herself through adversity. She had never worked a day in her life. But I fixed it anyway. Because that's what I did. That's what I always did. I was the second mother, the unpaid tutor, the substitute parent. I was the backup plan. The one they called when things went wrong. The one they leaned on, leaned over, leaned past. But I was never the first thought. Never the chosen one. When college time came, I chose a school nearby to save on costs, took out loans, worked on campus, shared textbooks. My sister? She took a year off to travel and figure things out. She went to Bali for 2 months with money my parents gave her. I asked my mom about it once. She said, she needed the experience. You're the grounded one. You understand? Yes, I understood. I understood that being the dependable one never meant being seen. It meant being used. It meant being expected. It meant standing in the background, steady and solid, while someone else stumbled into the spotlight and was applauded just for showing up. I carried that truth into adulthood, into my job interviews, into my relationships, into that moment in the kitchen when they asked me for rent while my sister watched cartoons in her pajamas. And I realized I had been the backup plan long enough. It was time to become my own. I didn't slam doors. I didn't shout. I didn't throw things. I just opened my laptop and started looking for rentals, studio apartments, tiny walk-ups, shared units with strangers, anything within my price range. The irony? I could afford rent. That wasn't the problem. I just never expected to have to prove my worth in my own home. But now that the line was drawn, I was done standing on the wrong side of it. That night, at dinner, I said nothing. I passed the salt. I asked about the weather. My sister complained about her phone charger being stolen, and my dad nodded like it was a national crisis. I smiled and did the dishes. Then I went upstairs and quietly started packing. I didn't have much. A few bags of clothes, my laptop, a desk lamp I'd bought with my first paycheck, some old notebooks, a framed photo of me and Grandma that was the only one that ever sat on my nightstand. Everything else? Replaceable. The house wasn't a home anymore. It was a transaction. A contract where love came with conditions and care required a receipt. The next morning, I got up early and printed my resume, just in case I'd need to pick up extra hours. I scheduled 2 apartment viewings. Then, I walked past my mom sipping coffee in the kitchen. She looked up and said, "Good morning." I said, "Morning." That was it. She didn't ask where I was going or how I was feeling. I think she thought I was still stewing, or that I'd get over it. They always assumed I'd come around. They didn't realize I was already walking away. 3 days later, I signed a lease for a small apartment above a laundromat. It smelled like detergent and old tile. The ceiling fan made a weird noise, but it was mine. That same afternoon, I boxed up the last of my things and wrote a note. No drama, just a few sentences. I wrote, "Since you want rent so badly, I'll take my work ethic elsewhere. No hard feelings. Just tired of being the only one expected to carry weight while someone else floats." I folded the note, left it on the kitchen counter, and locked the front door behind me. I waited for a text. Nothing. I checked my phone the next day. Still nothing. By the end of the week, it hit me. They weren't surprised. They weren't even disappointed. They were relieved. I was the utility they never had to worry about. until I stopped plugging into their circuit. And when I unplugged, they didn't notice the lights dim, because my work, my money, my patience, it had become background noise. Now without it, they didn't feel silence. They felt freedom, or so they thought. My new place was small. The mattress sat directly on the floor. The heater rattled at night. I ate cereal out of a mug for the first week because I hadn't bought plates yet, but I slept better than I had in years. There were no footsteps stomping down the hallway, no yelling over Wi-Fi passwords, no guilt trips about family dinners, no expectation to fill the fridge, fix the router, fold the towels. It was quiet. So was I, until I started laughing. Alone in my own space, folding second-hand bed sheets, I laughed, because they thought I'd beg, they thought I'd argue, push back, fight to stay. But I didn't, because it never occurred to them that I'd choose myself. I stopped being the default, stopped being the shadow everyone forgot to thank, stopped asking to be seen. Instead, I became visible, to myself. The first month was tough. I budgeted hard, I skipped coffee runs, I took freelance gigs after hours, but every bill I paid felt like proof that I didn't need to earn my place in someone else's house, proof that I could build something, however small, that belonged to me. I didn't post about it online, didn't announce it to the family, I didn't need applause, I just needed peace. And I had it. A week after I moved in, my sister posted a photo on Instagram, a selfie in our parents' living room captioned, "Still the queen of this castle." I smiled when I saw it, because she was right. She was still the queen. But I'd abdicated the throne. I didn't need their castle. I had a foundation now. Even if it was just 400 square feet and a leaky faucet, I'd built it without anyone's permission. And I walked away with nothing. But at least it was mine. I didn't have a 5-year plan when I moved out. I had a job, a tiny apartment, and a backbone that had just started to stiffen. That was enough. In the beginning, everything was about survival. I worked long hours, took weekend shifts, and taught myself how to stretch $20 into 3 meals and a coffee. I didn't complain. No one was listening anyway. My boss at the time, Carla, noticed I stayed late, always said yes, never missed a deadline. One Thursday, she tapped me on the shoulder as I was restocking the office fridge. Carla said, "You ever thought about applying for the operations coordinator role?" I blinked. "Me?" She nodded. "You've basically been doing the work already." I didn't know how to respond. No one had ever offered me more without me having to beg first. I applied that night, got the promotion 2 weeks later. It wasn't flashy, but it was mine. With the pay bump, I upgraded from the mattress on the floor to an actual bed frame, bought matching dishes, real curtains. I called it my grown-up apartment, even though it still echoed when I walked barefoot through it. I hosted myself a 1-person housewarming. Pizza, a candle, and a playlist I made for the occasion. I remember standing in the middle of the room, barefoot on that cold floor, thinking, this may not be much to anyone else, but to me, this is everything. Around that time, I got a text from my sister. She wrote, "Ugh, Mom's mad I didn't clean again. Can you remind her I'm not a maid?" I stared at the message. I hadn't heard from her in months. Not when I moved, not when I changed jobs, not when I posted graduation photos from my night course, but now she needed backup. I didn't respond. She stayed home, literally and emotionally. She'd been in that same bedroom since high school, still sleeping until noon, still arguing with Mom about who left dishes in the sink. She posted selfies from the backyard with captions like, "Chill Queen vibes. Why move out when rent is free?" It wasn't subtle. She wanted everyone to know she had it easy. And I let her. Because while she was measuring life in brunches and birthday gifts, I was laying brick by brick. After my promotion, I started saving more aggressively. I read books about finance, took a weekend course on small business strategy. I didn't tell anyone what I was planning. I cooked all my meals at home, said no to weekend trips, tracked every penny in a spreadsheet. 16 months after moving into my apartment, I signed papers on my first investment property. A small 2-bedroom fixer-upper on the edge of downtown. It wasn't pretty, but it had potential. Peeling paint, creaky floors, a backyard full of weeds. But I saw what it could become. The woman at the title office said, "Congratulations, homeowner." I walked out of that building feeling 10 feet tall. Later that night, I got dinner with an old college friend. She raised a glass and said, "To getting out and staying out." I smiled. To building instead of begging. We clinked glasses. I spent my weekends sanding wood, painting walls, and learning how to fix cabinet doors from YouTube. The progress was slow, but each small upgrade felt like a personal victory. A week later, I got a call from my uncle, the one who always overshared without thinking. He said, "Hey, you didn't hear this from me, but your folks took out another loan on the house." I sat up. "Another one?" "Yeah," he said. "They're underwater. Your dad mentioned something about refinancing to help pay off one of your sister's credit cards." I closed my eyes. Of course, still living at home, still making messes, still getting rescued. I thanked him for the call. The next day, I looked up the address to their house on the public property records site. Sure enough, 2 home equity loans in 5 years. The house I grew up in, the one I scrubbed clean every Saturday, the one where I was told to pay my share, was now leveraged to cover my sister's spending habits. And they had the nerve to ask me for rent? I sat back and laughed, not bitter, just amazed. Every month, I set a goal. 1 month it was, build a website for my freelance work. The next month, network with 3 local businesswomen. Another, pitch to 10 clients. And I did it. Quietly, methodically, while my sister posted selfies complaining that no one gets me to Instagram stories. I didn't need validation. I needed traction. And that's what I got. Slowly, one late night and early morning at a time. Eventually, one of my freelance clients said, "Have you ever thought about turning this into a full business?"